Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the What We Want podcast with me, Tasneem Saith. Today, we have a powerful conversation ahead as we speak with the founder of Safe Talk, a South African non-profit organization dedicated to suicide prevention and awareness. A journey that started with the tragic loss of his brother, and his story is one of strength, resilience, and a deep commitment to helping others who are struggling. To all our listeners and viewers out there, this is the one and only Lino Muller. Good morning, Lino, and how are you doing?
Hi. I'm good, thanks. Wow, what a great introduction. Thank you very much. I feel like a superstar already.
Welcome to the What We Want podcast, actually, and I'm so glad to have you on. Truly honored.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be in your presence.
We actually did the radio interview not too long ago, and I think we just touched the surface on this topic. And I feel like there's so much more that we should talk about and, get into your whole insights on this topic of suicide. So, we know your story, right? It's
Yeah,
a deeply personal one, and the loss of your brother to suicide. Can you walk us down through your experience and what was it like?
sure. So, it, I look at it with with productivity and positivity now because his death may have helped many others, if we can look at it that way. Um, we with my brother's death, it was also very sudden. I mean, he was a naughty guy. I'm not saying he was an angel, um, naughty not in a sense of he did crime and did malicious things, but it was a sort of a teenage thing. I think he was 18, 19, and he did the things we thought teenagers do. Me being a older brother, my father, and we never expected it. We didn't know any signs. We didn't know any symptoms. We didn't see anything, to indicate that. And it sort of bugged me for many years because he took his life over 25 years ago. And for years it was like, okay, but what could we have done? Should we have seen this? And could we have prevented this? And um, we had no idea. We used, I think, to comfort ourselves, we used the stigma driven excuses. If he wanted to die, so be it, and he was selfish, so he took his life. And we didn't have to feel all that bad if we said things like that. And then came the time where I started working with sports people professionally, and somehow they gravitated towards me and seemed to open up. And I heard many stories of trauma and how they were feeling, and which took me back to my brother. And I'm like, okay, but my brother didn't tell me any of these things, or I didn't see any of these things in my brother. I'm sort of seeing it now. And so it got into my head again, of could we have done things differently, and should we have, and why is there nothing that explains this to me, because no one has made sense of it to me after all these years. And then I went to the UK to live and work, in about 2015, and I started seeing the importance they put on mental health and suicide and self-harm. And I ended up working for an organization, an NGO, and they deal with suicide prevention, self harm, mental wellness, and that's when I started seeing how much this was needed in South Africa, because in South Africa we face far more adversity, um, than people in Europe, for instance. So let's call it the United Kingdom specifically, since I'm speaking from direct experience there. I mean, our crime, our corruption, our unemployment, our violence, is far worse than they have it in the UK. Yet in the UK, they place so much importance on it, and we don't here. And that's when I decided I'm going to come back to SA, and I'm going to start this initiative here.
Wow, absolutely great. And you said you feel like a hero. So we have a hero amongst us in our community. And I think that is just so brilliant, to find purpose in the struggle that you've been through. And in the aftermath of your brother's passing, like what were the specific challenges or like emotions? You said you felt the guilt that you could have prevented
Mm,
it, but when did you feel like now, okay, this is it? I'm feeling these feelings. I need to raise awareness and I need to do something about suicide so it doesn't happen to someone else. And that,
mm.
I think, how did that lead you to say?
Well, it took many years. Like I said, it was a multi-event uh, occurrences that brought me to this. It's 25 years where later that I could actually do something about it. And I guess the problem was that we don't address suicide and suicide things. There's always the stigma around it. There's always the shame around it, and you can't grieve because of what you're facing from society. You have this insecurity that someone might think, oh well, he's a bad brother or they bad parents. How could he have taken his life? Couldn't they see? Did they treat him badly? And it was the opposite. I mean, we had quite a good relationship, other than the normal teenage, naughtiness that came about. So it's not just it's not treated as a normal death. There's just so many thoughts and permutations and implications and guilt, and there's just a whole bunch of crazy around it, if I can say that.
And you mentioned something about stigma, right? And I think
Mm,
this is something that we have to really dig deep in for all those listeners who are listening. They are facing, so many out there are facing mental health challenges. And what are the steps, that they can, you know, I think more than steps, I think it is just basically the stigma for reaching out
mm.
prevents them from that. So, yeah.
Well, let's break down what is stigma. Stigma is a wrong perception about an event. It's putting a wrong emphasis on something where we need to change the emphasis. We need to change our perception of it. And this is why I specifically chose to do workshops on suicide prevention and awareness, because in the workshops we break down the stigma. I mean, Tasneem, there are so many stigmas. I mean, if I had to tell you all the stigmas now, you might as well have posted the whole workshop online, right? But we talk about the stigmas, and then um, we break it down, and we sort of get into the mind of someone who has mental health issues or has trauma, um, and who is suicidal or who self harms, and we make people understand what they're going through, right? So that it's easier for people to approach and communicate. And I think, like what we said on the radio last time, it's like, if you have a plumber, you feel comfortable speaking to the plumber about plumbing issues. And if we train enough people, whether it's parents or teachers or nurses, and there are people who have issues with their mental health, it is statistically proven that there will be more openness and more communication, because there are qualified people that they can speak to. And that's the whole aim of it, is like, let's get rid of the stigma. Let's teach people how to communicate. Let's, and that will help. It will help leaders. It will empower them, but it's also brilliant for people who are not feeling good, who need someone to speak to. And the more people we have to speak to, the better, because that's ultimately the aim. And I can tell you, I mean, just a simple story. There was and it's such small differences, to Tasneem, that make a difference. An older sister was had some major mental health issues. I don't know the full details, but she was interviewed, and she was about to take her life. She was in her room and she was ready to overdose on tablets. And her little brother was downstairs and didn't want to disturb her. And he decided he's going to phone her from downstairs, and he phoned her and says, "I really need your help. I'm not coping with this homework that I have. Please, can you help me? I really need you." And that changed it. And she's still alive today just because she felt that she was needed. I mean, and the brother said this innocently, but it just shows you that small, tiny little actions can change people, because suicide, you're always on a scale, right? You're on a low risk and high risk, and you're moving up and down in between the scale. And small little differences, like, I need you because I need you. She felt needed. She felt that she mattered, and that she was a positive influence, or had a positive interaction, and that kept her alive. Obviously, she got more help afterwards, but it was sort of the tipping scale of her dying and her being alive.
That is absolutely heartwarming to hear that, someone feeling needed can prevent them from doing suicide. Like like I think you've mentioned this before, that they feel like they're a burden to us or to people around them. And like you said, we feel that people who take their lives are selfish. But when they actually, what do they feel?
The, Firstly, they've gotten to a point of no hope, where nothing matters anymore, and the only way they see is to be out. They've got so much pain that's inside them, that they can't live with that anymore. They just can't, and it's very difficult to explain to someone who's not in that situation. So it's easy for us to judge if we've never felt that way, and nobody here is in the business of judgment, and that's what we teach. We leave judgment to the creator, not us. So um, they feel that they are a burden. They feel that we are better off without them. I can tell you, in my brother's instance, my parents and him had a heartfelt talk about a week before, and he had expressed that he's going to change his life and be more productive and be more, how can I say it, less, you know, just contribute to the family life. And it was a great discussion, and it was like an eye-opening thing, and he wanted to, like, be a good boy. And he borrowed the car with permission, and unfortunately he had an accident in the car. I mean, it wasn't a bad accident. He scratched the car, and a few hours later he'd taken a gun and shot himself in the head. And it wasn't a case of that my parents scolded him for it. They were like, "Yeah, that happens. As long as you're safe, everything's okay. It wasn't your fault." Um, so we didn't understand now why. I would have maybe looked at it differently if he would have been punished, and we would have said to him, "Yeah, but you've been misbehaving, and now you've smashed the car." And well, none of that happened, and he still did that. And it's only years later that I realized that he was actually feeling like he was a burden. He's like, I'm messing up this family. I'm going to take my life. So it's it's a totally it's a totally different perspective from someone who's in this deep pain to someone who's always been able, or to someone who has mental resilience. But it's not up to the person who has mental resilience to judge the person who doesn't.
Definitely. And I think society has a big role to play in this. And, like, what are your thoughts on how society approaches these topics? I mean, what do you think can be done that we can do to shift the narrative?
It's a good question, Tasneem, and it's also a very delicate situation. And I'll go back to that. I'm just going to give you some background as to the UK. I felt in the UK that and it's a general thing, right? When we try and shift the balance of things, we tend to overdo it, and we shift the balance the other way again. We don't have equilibrium, right? We need to get equilibrium. So in the UK, for instance, what's happening now is, because there's been since, I mean, I saw it first in 2015, so it's almost 10 years where they've had this shift in their mental health approach. But it seems now in 2024, I came back in 2024, and it it seems that everyone is now oversensitive about everything. right? You cannot say anything without anyone being offended. You just have to, you know, it's just a very difficult situation in terms of sensitivity. You get into trouble a lot for saying things, for joking, innocent things, and everyone is on this hyper alert, on eggshells. What can we say and what can't we say? This might offend someone. This might hurt someone, and it's too much. And we can't do this in South Africa. We've got too much adversity to be sensitive to every little thing. Like we said, we've got a lot of crime. We have to somehow be resilient and face this thing because it is in our reality. It's not a nice thing, but it's out there, right? We have we have crazy amounts of road rage. We have gender-based violence. We have unemployment. And if we become sensitive and become what they call the snowflake society, we're just going to crumble up in a corner and wilt away or melt away like a snowflake, and we can't do that. So we have to be very careful in our approach so that we do not oversensitize things as they are in many European countries. So we cannot take their approach and apply it here
Mm.
100%. We can apply certain teachings which I've taken, and I'm applying it to our society here in South
Mm.
Africa or Africa, because it's very different.
No, that makes so much sense because I mean, starting a foundation here in South Africa is no easy task. And so what was your steps that you had to take to build the foundation of Safe Talk?
Um, the steps, I must say, I'm not facing a lot of red tape. I must say it's been pretty easy. I haven't been on the market for a long time. I started in October last year. I've had a good response. I'm obviously dealing with SARS and things like that, to make everything legitimate. The steps are difficult in terms of that we are not placing a whole bunch of mental health awareness and suicide awareness out there yet, and
Mm.
and people are not always. It seems like I'm the elephant in the room at times, because we're trying to discuss it and people don't know how to approach it. So when we do go to corporates or we do go to schools, everyone seems to be, not everyone, let's say some people, and quite a few, think that if we talk about suicide, it encourages suicide. I think that's the biggest obstacle I'm facing in opening, is that if we talk about it, it encourages it, and it doesn't. It's quite the opposite. It puts it out in the open. You know, I can relate it to drug abuse in Switzerland. The Swiss had a drug problem. There was a park in Switzerland which they called Needle Park, and everyone went there and they injected themselves with heroin, and they had cocaine readily available, and people were dying because of infection and overdosing. And the government decided to step in and decided to legalize this park. And they brought their how can I say, their ambulances, or they made stations there where they handed out clean needles and gave people dosages. So they had a very different proactive approach, where you and I might think like, how can we do this? How can we give people drugs? But what happened was, because of that, there were less deaths, and there were less people actually wanting to take drugs. So it actually the percentage, I can't give you the percentage now, but drug usage went down, and there were hardly any deaths, just because it was open and legalized. Now, I'm not saying we should legalize drugs, that's not the point of it, but the point is that sometimes if we bring something in the open, it it helps, and it definitely takes away the stigma.
Definitely. And also, we have to hit the nail on its head and address these certain topics that are happening in our community. And not only, I think, talking about our Muslim community also, but I think in society as a whole, and talking about our Muslim community. And I'm not too sure how the other communities are facing suicide. I mean, it's sad, and it's just heartbreaking to see that in our community, we know that in Islam, suicide is prohibited. But a lot cases are currently going on within our community, which are being
Yeah,
shoved under the carpet.
yeah. That's a good point. So it takes me back to that point of we can't put our head in the sand, right? And that's the same with the drug usage that they had in Switzerland in Needle Park, right? We knew that it was going on, and they didn't put their head in the sand. They did something proactively, which was quite shocking, but it worked. And yes, in the Muslim community, it's really shoved under the swept under the carpet. I had an incident where I needed to speak to someone about suicide within their family, and they sort of insisted that it wasn't a suicide. So I mean, it was I think she was about 22 years old, and she hung herself from the burglar bar in the bathroom. And one of the family members found her, and they got her off the burglar bar, and she was still alive, but she died about 5 or 10 minutes of suffocation afterwards. So instead of acknowledging that this was a death through suicide, they said no, it wasn't a death through suicide because she didn't die when she tried to hang herself. She died when we found her. I mean, that doesn't make sense to you or myself, Tasneem, but that's the stigma and the shame. Imagine they were so desperate not to tell their family or tell the community that she had died by suicide that they'd make up something so ridiculous, sorry to say, that they said it wasn't death through suicide. Now, that's just one incident. There are so many incidents. And like I said, I've been working, and because I'm near the Lenasia community, and I've been working in the Lenasia community for a long time, I hear all these happenings. I hear about all the suicides that are going on. And I thought it'd be a good time to introduce my course. I advertised the course and the workshop at the facility at the Islamic Healthline. And I had absolutely no responses, which shocked me because of the sheer number of people that are taking their lives. A few weeks ago, a few months ago, I think it was before Christmas, there was a family, and the wife was watching the kids outside, and the husband was inside, and he took his life. A few days ago, there was a man that went missing who walked into the lake, Oberfat's Lake, and into the reeds, and they're still looking for the body, apparently. It shocks me. These are just stories that I get by word of mouth. So imagine how many more there are. And yet, when I've made myself available to do a workshop, there's been no responses. And yet, I did it in Rosebank, and I was basically sold out. So there seems to be a big gap into, are we going to face this or are we not going to face it? And it seems like in the Islamic community, people are not ready to face it. And that's not going to help the situation. It's going to cause more harm.
Definitely. And I think we have to, yeah, we have to stand. We have to spread more awareness in the communities that need this. And so going just a little bit back, you said like in going in doing the course in Rosebank, what was some of the feedback that you've received, that have really made a difference?
Um, it was, I've had great feedback because people said that they had this notion that the course was going to be dark and it's going to be sad and it's just going to feel terrible after the course, and it's not. Yes, there are some hard topics that we cover. It's there are some, I try and make it as lighthearted. I still believe in humor, and I think South Africans believe in humor, and I want to keep it upbeat and constructive and positive, but obviously we can't ignore the fact that suicide is a dark subject. It is something that's not nice to talk about, but we do it as best as we can, and we go through stages in the workshop where we touch on some very sensitive issues, but we also have fun with it. So the main thing that I took from it is that people said they were amazed at the communication part of it, and they were amazed at the statistics, and we give a bit of history about where stigma comes from, and we speak about different cultures also, and how their stigma, and there was a lot of feedback. It was very interactive, so it wasn't just me standing there talking for 4 hours or 5 hours. We had group sessions, and we had a lot of feedback. People actually opened up, and the course, the workshop is not actually for you to get counseling or open up in the audience. It's to teach you. But what the course seems to be, excuse me, what the course seems to be doing is actually making people feel comfortable just speaking about it in that environment already, even though it's not meant for that. But I've had lots of people speaking up in front of the other, delegates, what happened to them, and thanking me that I brought this out. So I've had really nice feedback, and it makes you feel good that you are contributing, and helping people.
Of course. And, I think encouraging those safe spaces is what people need to understand, that if you are struggling with mental health, go to seek help. And that is also one thing that oops, sorry. Okay. And that's also one thing that Islam like teaches in the Quran, like, Allah says in the Quran, kill people, don't kill yourself and don't kill people as well. And our
Mm.
Prophet encourages that, if we do need help, we should seek that help. So I think
Yeah,
it's very important that we should not feel ashamed or guilty, or if we are struggling with mental illnesses, or any difficulty in the mental well-being, we should seek help. And I think that is one important thing that you guys are doing, is that you're creating the safe space and environment to feel supported and heard. And so,
yeah,
but going into mental health, right? We
yeah.
Is it, you see suicide falling under that category mostly, or is it also, I've been speaking to a friend and she's also in your line of work, she helps a lot with people who have substance abuse, and she started her own rehab in the Lenasia area, which is great, and I think you guys should really network. But so there's a lot of cases where she comes across people overdosing and coming into the rehab, and they fall down and just gone. And do you find that it's suicide mostly links to mental health issues?
Tasneem, it's so intertwined, um, that it's almost impossible to give it the 100% correct definition. People drink and take substances, and because it masks how they're feeling. So yes, I would say it's trauma, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's someone who was diagnosed with a mental. That's why I say it's so intertwined. But the problem also lies that if you start taking drugs to make yourself feel better, you're going to feel worse when you actually have to deal with it and get off the drugs. So it's just a vicious circle. And the drugs themselves cause damage to the brain, which then creates more mental health issues. So it is really a vicious circle. Um, there's also, there's all sorts of drug abuse, and there's even abuse of medical, prescribed over the counter medicines, which get abused. And your friend has a big task ahead of her, because in South Africa our statistics are not that great. Like I said, we have an official suicide rate of 14,000 a year, but that's probably double or triple that amount. So in terms of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, the statistics are vaguely out there. But like I said, I think it's a vicious circle of people. Just even if you don't have a mental condition, taking drugs themselves can cause a mental condition. if you know what I mean.
Mm.
So that's why I said it's a vicious circle, and it's just never a good thing to be on any sort of substance. And we have, for instance, in America, we have mental health, and it's also very differently viewed as compared to us here, where in America it's very clinicalized, where if you have a mental health problem, you immediately go onto antidepressants. And it's also, I mean, that's also not a good thing, because none of those things are proactive in helping you actually deal with trauma or mental health conditions. It's just putting a band-aid on a broken leg. So we're not, we're more proactive. And you said also you mentioned in Islamic culture, or in the Islamic religion, which obviously the cultural influence, um, we don't focus a lot on living a healthy lifestyle, even though the Prophet practiced and preached healthy lifestyle. Um, so yeah, I'm jumping ships from the things that we put in our mouth and in our stomach directly affect our mental health. I mean, 90% of our serotonin levels are produced in our gut. Um, so and then you put in drugs there, and it totally shifts your natural balance of hormones, and you know it's a vicious circle to say, yeah.
Mm, definitely. And I think you've explained it very well, because when it comes to also mental health, and a lot of difficulty that you've touched on earlier was that in our country we faced a lot of like domestic violence and marriage issues, and there's so many ways that people look to get out of these struggles and challenges, when if they just give it a moment to go through the storm, they will see the silver lining towards the end. But I just feel like there's so many other factors that can cause suicidal thoughts. And I mean, one topic that really needs to be addressed is in women. I'm not too sure what are the statistics, if suicide is something that more male predominant or more female, or is it like both now?
Yeah,
But I know, yeah.
that's a good question. So the 70% of men compared to 30% of women die by suicide. So I've often been asked to speak to men and speak to men only, and we must focus on men. And I prefer to do this holistically, and I've seen the statistics a bit differently. And the reason men are 70% more, they're basically 70% more successful, which is nothing to boast about. But that's just because they have a more, how can I say, violent means. And women are just not as successful they don't follow through with the suicide, or they're unsuccessful with the attempt. Um, and that's the only reason why the statistics are 70-30. And if women were as successful in the attempt and followed through with suicide, we would be on par. So it would be very wrong to focus on men only. That would be tipping the scale again where it shouldn't be tipped to. The only reason is that women don't have that lethal means as men do. They just aren't as good as following through with it. So it doesn't. I mean, it takes that statistic takes away that we're struggling equally in different ways.
Definitely. And I think one very hard one is that women who have just given birth, who are new mothers, struggle with the postnatal depression, which is also basically mental health issue. But yeah, so it's a lot of women feel at that stage where they've just given birth to a child. And you've mentioned this also, that a lot of people who are struggling and feeling these suicidal thoughts are feeling that they can't cope in life. What other signs can we look out for, from a loved one or from anyone?
So people speaking about it, people saying, don't take lightly phrases like "I can't deal with this anymore" or "I've had enough of this." People giving away possessions. People saying, "Oh, what's left for me to do?" Or any statements of hopelessness are things that we need to look out for. And I would suggest if you do that, um, don't ignore if you listen to them. There are these things. Don't ignore it. Approach the person. You're free to say to them, I see you've been struggling lately, and you mentioned that you're feeling hopeless. Is there anything I can help you with? How can I assist you? How can I make you? Just approach it. Don't ignore it. Don't like we. I think it's the third or fourth time that I've said it. Don't stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not there. And like I said, safe talk is there. So that we can give you the tools on how to approach this. It's not just for corporates. It's for mothers. It's for fathers. It's for anybody who responds to anything. Um, yeah,
That is important. And if you can, share with us and all the listeners and viewers out there, how can they reach out to help, or if they know someone struggling with suicidal thoughts and mental health issues, if they can reach out to you for a loved one or for themselves, it's a safe space, no judgments, and
yeah,
is there a contact number or social media page that
yeah.
we can?
I just want to clarify at the moment what we are doing, and that's because we only started in October, so we're still pretty new. So our emphasis is on group events where we have a workshop, and I mean it doesn't have. We can have 5 or 10 people there. That's okay. Um, and we don't have any sponsorships yet, as we're new. So these are all charged sessions. But we focusing on group sessions on educating people. We have, however, seen that there's a need for people to just come and talk, and offer a safe space. So I've partnered with a lady called Mandy, and that's in Lenasia, where we just get together and people express their feelings and how they feel. It's mostly people who are suicidal. It's just people who have maybe self-harm, people who've just had suicidal thoughts. And yeah, we just have an hour chat every Friday in the evening. It's a space where you're not judged, where you're able to express yourself, where you're able to admit to other people what you're going through, and it's a space where you can see that you're not alone. And it's important for us to see that you're not alone, because people who are like that feel isolated, and you think that you're the only one on earth. It doesn't help me telling you, hey, there's other people that feel this way. It only helps if you're in a setting and you actually see other people's struggles as well. Um, so yeah, we have done that, and you can reach out to us on my website, which is www.safetalk.co.za, and the business phone number is on there. Please do feel free to reach out. We are planning, what's in the pipeline is that we want a counseling center. Um, Obviously, we'll still decide where we're going to start off, because we want to go countrywide. We are going to have a helpline as well. That's in the pipeline. And we are also doing more constructive prevention programs where this is not our one thing is suicide prevention, and that's dealing with people in crisis, but we want long-term help. And me coming from a health sports background, performance coach and sports coach, have decided to put together um, for corporates, um, a wellness program where you know, we have an app, and you're rewarded for eating healthy food, and you're rewarded for exercise. And the reason it's so important is because Exercise, for instance, gives you the same release of chemicals and hormones as an antidepressant would, right? With much positive effects on the body. Eating properly has such a huge impact on your mental health. I mean, the sugary foods and the fatty foods that we eat, they create so much trauma in the brain and create brain fog and caffeine and anxiety. There's such a link between food and nutrient deficiencies and blood sugar levels that we can't just be saying, okay, we depressed and we're not feeling good and we're shoving all this bad stuff into ourselves and thinking we're going to operate fine. Um, because there is a mind and body connection.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a very good point that you've mentioned there. So, Lino, I'm very excited for the upcoming initiatives that you have planned. I hope all goes well, and also, the upcoming projects and the campaigns that you wish to, start in communities. So, looking back at what we've spoken about, like how have, for you, what was the most you spoke about your brother and his whole death on your life. It was the biggest impact, right? And it really affected you. What else was the biggest experience that stands out for you doing this type of work that
Um,
basically encouraged you to continue?
yeah. So I've had three close friends take their life in the past 3 years as well, and that was another inspiring, yeah, motivation to get things going. Because also, I mean, only one of them actually spoke about her struggles. The other two were, you had no idea. It was a big macho guy, big ego, big muscles, not a guy that you would associate with vulnerability. And it just showed me that, um, anybody can be vulnerable, and not many people are actually talking about that vulnerability. And like I said, men are different to women where they internalize it. Women often actually want to verbalize it, but don't have the right audience to verbalize it. So we're on two opposite spectrums. We're just so different, and I think that we spoke about it before. Um, that's where so much conflict arises in marriages, for instance, is because the communication is just so different. Where a female would go to the husband and start an emotional rampage, and the man would think, oh my goodness, my wife is feeling this way, what can I do to help? And he'll start thinking of every possible solution, and it's not necessary. She's not coming to him because she wants a solution. She wants a shoulder to cry on, and she wants some emotional support. A man doesn't see that. A man thinks he has to help and he has to now take action, and he starts telling her about all the solutions he has in mind and all the things that she has to do in order to feel well, and never actually acknowledging the pain that she's in or the trauma that she's going through. And she gets irritated because of that, and the man doesn't understand why she's irritated, and he's irritated because she's irritated. And it's just a miscommunication, and it's just communication coming from different levels of interpretation and different perspectives. And I thought we need to put it out there that we need to put that out there so that people understand, even in marriages, that we understand each other. Because women will talk and say, oh, my husband is like that, and the men will say, oh, my wife is like that, and we just don't get it. So simple communication like that, the communication that we use for suicide prevention, is the same what you could use in your marriage, or is the same as you could use with your kids. So I just thought that communication in the workshop is a big factor because it's just so helpful.
That's a comprehensive approach, and I think something like that is so common in. I feel like our influential people in our community should also, use that approach. That could help understand what couples are going through and people who are struggling. So
Yeah,
brilliant stuff there. So, coming to the end of our podcast, I think there's so much to talk about on this topic, but we'll get you another time again. No, really, I appreciate your time and, for, just doing the work that you do. I mean, just coming on and sharing your stories, sharing your wisdom with us and talking about the incredible work that you're doing and using your time for Safe Talk and to help, save lives and prevent what's currently going on now in our community. So just know that you're really having impact on the community. So is
yeah,
there
that's good.
anything that you'd like to end with in closing?
Um, I think my general message would be in summarizing what we've spoken about over 2 sessions now is that we need to talk more and we need to open up and we need to start the conversation and we need to educate ourselves more. And this education will save lives. And it's not just going to save lives in the workplace, it's going to save lives in your communities and it's going to save lives in your families. And it's just going to create a better understanding and it's going to help you communicate better in general, and have more empathy. And that's the take home. Let's talk about it. Don't No reason to feel shy or egotistical or proud. Let go of those things and yeah, let's educate ourselves.
I love that. Compassion and education. That is, I think, two keys in this whole conversation. So, your journey is one of strength and compassion. And yeah, I think to all our viewers and listeners out there, just don't feel alone. There's always help available. Reach out to reach out to Safe Talk and any trusted community members. Yeah, that you
Mm.
shouldn't face these challenges alone. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you go from strength to strength in your organization. And
Thank you.
as much as people don't want to reach out for help, we need to look for them and give them that guidance and help and show our support. So thank you for
Yeah.
reaching out.
Thank you. And thank you. And you play a vital part in bringing that message out there. And I appreciate that we were able to do this a second time already.
I just the whole point of this podcast is to just spread awareness and empower
Yes.
organizations and people who are doing good work like yourself in the world. They should be known for you should be known for what you do. And like we said, if we can help, it's not about the views or how many listeners that we get. It's about, even if it reaches one person, it can help save
Yeah.
that one person's life. So definitely.
If I may, I know we're out of time, Tasneem, but I
Oh
think I
no.
ended off our last conversations where we spoke about we need to work together as NGOs and NPCs and government entities, and that we're not in competition with each other, and we need to collaborate because it's not a competition space. It's about saving lives, and there are many mental health organizations out there. And I mean, I try and reach out to everyone to collaborate because the work that we're doing is for the people. It's for everyone. And like I said, I don't want to be in competition with NPOs or NGOs. We need to work together in this. So that if there are people out there that want to collaborate or be part of it, please let me know. I'm not in competition with anyone. I'm in this to save lives. So let's work together.
Very, very important point. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for all your insights and yeah, for making the time for us in the community.
Thank you, Tasneem. Much appreciated.